How you doing? Anthony Ferraro here, Create Sci-Fi. This week, another build, and I want to keep going down the Mandalorian build highway. It's just, once I go down the rabbit hole with something, I just really get into it. I've been reading a lot about it, and I start seeing images, and then, you know, when you're doing your late night shopping or browsing, I've lately been landing on Mandalorian things. So what I want to do next is make the blaster. Now the coolest one to me is the classic Boba Fett, right? And this is very iconic, and this is very cool with this rifle stock, but I think it's a little too on the nose if I want to do just a Mandalorian character. And like I said before, what I really love about these characters is you get to individualize kind of their gear and the costume to your own personal aesthetic, you know, within certain guidelines, but pretty much, you know, you can customize, and that's what really attracted me to the idea of doing these. So with these, with this rather, so what I want to do is make it back into a sidearm. So basically this is a sidearm with the rifle stock, right? So I'm going to take off this rifle stock. We're going to do a little paint treatment on this. There's screw holes on the other side. We're going to get rid of the seams, probably open up the barrel. And then I was thinking about how can I make this scope a little more realistic, and I was thinking about drilling it out and doing things. And when I was looking for stuff online, then I found, you know, for a BB gun, air gun, these scopes, and it was on Amazon, I think it was like $5, $6. So I have this real scope, and again, you know, I don't know if it's probably not a great scope, but you know, I see the crosshairs there, which is just pretty cool. And you know, it's just a prop, so I'm going to replace that plastic one with that real one, so that's going to be cool. And then for the handle, it's a little short, it's like a finger short, so I'm either going to extend it or replace it. Again, on eBay, you know, I found these handle sleeves, I guess they are. This was like $9. I'm not sure if I'm going to go down this route, but it's like a tactical replacement for your pistol. That'll go on there. Or I'm going to just extend this a little, maybe with some styrene, and I don't know. We'll figure it out when we get in there. We'll see at the end of this video. All right, so very excited about this. I think that's going to be really cool. All right, so let's dig in. So the first thing we're gonna do is liberate this from its packaging. And we just wanna get all the screws out. We're gonna take this apart for sanding and painting, and I'm actually gonna add some weight to this. So take out all the screws, make sure you don't lose them. And now I'm gonna remove the scope, but it turns out that this was just sort of pressure fit in there between the screws. So I take this scope out. Now this I'll keep because I'll use it maybe for something else, because I'm gonna replace it with a real scope. So now I'm just gonna separate these pieces. And I have these sinkers, they're for fishing. They're lead, they're 3 ounces and 1 ounce. And what I basically do is just put them in here so we can just get a little bit of weight to this. Use a ridiculous amount of hot glue to put these in, but that's just because I don't want them going anywhere. So now I just sort of test the weight off camera. I think I remove 1 or 2 of them. Just want to get a nice balance, but you don't want it to be too heavy. So now, since I have this already separated, I'm just making a stencil here that I'm going to use later when I make the decorative wood for the handles. And now, just straightforward, I'm sure you guessed it, we're gonna super glue this together. We don't want it going anywhere, so we use super glue. Now I'm just testing the balance, and yeah, I'm glad I put those lead weights in there. It just gives it a little bit of life. So now I'm gonna create a template for the handle because I want to extend it and make some foam pieces. So I just want just 1 extra finger in there. So I create these 2 foam pieces that are gonna go on either side. And now I'm just gonna take my Dremel and just get rid of these nubs that are now in the way because we don't have that rifle stock anymore. And I'm just basically creating a structure in foam. So now I'm going to take the super glue and I'm going to place this piece of foam on there. This is just an accelerator, so it'll bond instantly. And I'm just trying to get the form of the new pistol grip. So now I just have another piece of foam here, EVA foam. And I use the Dremel just to give it some shape. I'm just creating, again, this is like a rough core that I'm gonna later cover in styrene plastic sheets. So I just sort of blend everything together there. Again, this is rough because it's the interior. And there we test the fit, and that looks good. So that's basically the amount we added. So now I'm making another stencil. This is going to be the final styrene piece that's going to give it some form. Again, I use the painter's tape just so I can get a more exact size. And I'm just double checking this here to make sure that that's gonna fit before I cut it out of the styrene. And that works good. So now I'm gonna just cut this out of the styrene. Just with the styrene, you just use an X-Acto knife, and once you have it scored, it's pretty easy to cut out of there. I'm just making some additional cuts here so I have some place to grab when I cut it. And there, just snaps right out. So there's my styrene face for the pistol grip. I'm gonna have one on each side, basically just making a sandwich. And now I put the two pieces together, and I'm taking my Dremel sanding drum just so that I can make sure that they're both very similar in size, so it's not weird when I put the middle piece on there. So now I'm just doing some final sanding just to get rid of the little rough patches on the edge. And now I'm putting some registration marks for when I glue it down, so I have something to aim for, because I want to use the instant bond with the glue. And there off camera, I put the middle strip. Sorry about that, that wasn't on purpose, but I had to wrestle with that and the camera wasn't running and I didn't want to do it again. So now with that middle piece secure, I'm just taking the Dremel tool and I'm just smoothing everything out so that it's all uniformed. Now I'm sanding it by hand. Again, just to do it step by step, what it is you want to kind of conform everything. As I say a lot, you know, it's round peg, square hole. Now I'm just sanding where the screw holes are because I'm going to be putting some Bondo in there. So here's just basic car Bondo. You can get it at the home store for about 15 bucks. And I'm putting a generous amount on here. Usually I don't like to put it on this thick because it does cure like a rock and it's hard to sand. But I have some gaps I want to fill, and I also am creating some form with the Bondo. There's that rounded piece there by the trigger that I'm basically making out of Bondo. So there's the whole Bondo job right there. Now I'm taking a palm sander because, like I said, there's a lot of Bondo on there, a little more than I would like. And I'm just shaping this, right? We're sculpting it. I want to round the edges a little. And now I'm taking an emery board to do that rounded piece I talked about at the top. And I just want to get that at the right shape. And I'm also doing the grips, just kind of beveling the edges a little so it feels better in the hand. Again, more sanding, a lot of sanding when you're doing this kind of work. So now I'm just gonna go ahead, since I'm in sanding mode, and sand the entire piece so that it'll better accept the paint. So here's some troubled spots. Inevitably, when you use Bondo, that's what's gonna happen. And then also the places where I sanded off the seam of where the two pieces of the plastic joined. So now I'm just taking some spot putty and I'm putting it in those trouble spots. Again, a little thicker than you usually want, but we're sculpting with this. And now I have all my little divots and holes filled in, and I'm gonna go ahead and sand that with a little bit of a finer sandpaper. This I'm sanding by hand so I can get a better feel for it. You just want to hide all those holes that we created. So now off camera, I put a piece of PVC in the barrel. I just opened that up and glued a piece of PVC in there. That's pretty straightforward. And now I'm just using some steel wool before I do the first coat of black primer. All right, so now that we have everything primed, I'm going to add this scope. And of course it doesn't want to fit perfectly. It's almost right. So first thing I do before I attach it is I just want to sand this up because I don't want it to look brand new. I'm going to be weathering the whole gun, and I'm going to go ahead and weather this scope so it doesn't look like it's right out of the package. So now I can get it to grip on these fins on the barrel of the gun. They're just, you know, about 1 millimeter too wide. So I'm using my sanding Dremel here just to narrow that down so that it'll fit. So now that's a nice tight fit, and I'm really liking the way that looks. And I'm going to use some 5-minute epoxy. Now there's a screw clamp on the scope that grabs in, but I just want to sort of double down with some epoxy. So I mix up some 5-minute epoxy here, and we're just gonna permanently secure this scope. Let that cure. And now I'm going to do a dry brushing of some silver over the whole piece. Now this, you just want to use a tiny bit of silver on the brush, wipe it off, and you're just going to gently kiss the piece. And it's just going to pick up the high points. You don't want to paint this, you just want to hit the edges. And it gives it that really cool metal look. And there you see, especially when the light hits it, right? That really looks like metal. So now I'm going to hit that whole thing with some clear coat just to seal that in. We don't want that to scrape off. And while that clear coat is drying, I'm gonna make these wooden panels for the side. Just so that it's not this big chunk of black, I have this wood veneer. It's about the width of construction paper, but it's actual wood, and it has a adhesive back. With just scissors, I'm going to cut out this handle shape that I created, and it's just going to give the illusion of like a wooden handle insert. And it's just an easy way to do that. So now I just take some brown acrylic, watered down to make it look like stain. I could have used real stain, but this was easy. And now I take off the adhesive back and we just attach that on the handles. And it just really is a nice little touch, right? So now I'm going to blend this more into the piece because that's brand new. I just take this file and I just put some gouges that travel through the wood into the piece. But because I did that after my damage, I'm going to just have to add a little paint in there to tie it all together. But it's really worth it to do that step. And yeah, that looks like some wood that's lived on there for a while. We've been running around using that gun. So now just one final touch. I have these brass screws, and this is one of those details that's just, you know, it takes 5 minutes and it just really adds a lot of value. So I drilled some little pilot holes, and now I'm just going to use a touch of super glue here because, you know, there's nothing really for those screws to grab onto, and I want to make sure that they're not going anywhere. So screw those in. And yeah, that's just a subtle little detail that really adds a lot of value. All right, so now usually I weather the whole piece with like a black wash, but in this case, I'm just gonna do just a little bit of brown acrylic. Not gonna weather it too much because I think that stripped metal look really sells it. So I'm just using some brown acrylic with a tiny bit of water, just in places where I think dirt would accumulate. And I'm just wiping that off now with a paper towel. And it gives it just a nice subtle hue of dirt. You know, you have to really stare to see it, but subconsciously it's there, and it does make the piece pop. So now I'm taking some rub and buff, and you gotta be careful with this because a little goes a long way. And I'm just hitting some high points. This just is a wax with metal in it. And if you see right there, the difference, right? That's with and without, and it's just a nice little light catcher. But again, you gotta be careful because you can go overboard with it very easily. And there you see it reflecting the light. And we're gonna seal it all in with another coat of clear. And here's the final gun. Really happy with the way this turned out. It catches the light really nicely. There's some detail. And you can see a little bit of that dirt in there. And there it is in all its glory.
So happy with the way that came out. I mean, again, with the Star Wars stuff, it's such a great place to start. But with the Mandalorian, like I said before, what's so much fun about that is, you get to do some battle damage and customize it. Putting the real scope on there, I think, really made a difference. Well, the only thing left to do now is to fire it up. All right. I'm on another one. Let's check that scope. Well, as always, I hope you found this video useful. Please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. I love to